Thank you, Alex. Thank you. Well, hello, and welcome to Pebble Beach. It's a beautiful place, and I'm thrilled to be here with you. As you heard from Alex, I've been involved in launching new stuff my entire career, and I love doing it. I'm super excited to share with you what I think is the biggest opportunity of my career and probably your careers as well. I'm going to do that in this talk, but I'm also going to talk about anxiety. I'm going to talk about some of the problems that we face because, come on, get real. There's a lot of free-floating anxiety in the world right now, and our technology has something to do with that. So I'm going to talk about both of those topics. I have to tell you from the start, though, I'm an optimist. You can't launch new stuff and not be an optimist. Every time you launch a new service, you start from a drawing or a sketch or a plan, and then you create something that never existed before. Some stuff is going to go wrong. You know that's going to happen, right? In the creative process, we always say plan on failure, otherwise plan to fail. You've got to be anticipating that point where something's going to go haywire, so you have to maintain a steady sense of optimism, and I have that. I for sure have that. I know a lot of people here who have launched digital services share that. But at the same time, I can't help but notice we live in a time where there's an awful lot of tension. There's a lot of uncertainty. Consider that chaos field called Washington, D.C. that's now transmitting jolts of electricity into investors, business leaders, regulators, environmental groups all over the world, not to mention our allies around the world who are kind of scratching their heads going, wait, we thought we could rely on you, what's going on? And our adversaries who are kind of chuckling at all the disorder that's been created. It's a very uncertain time. And then when you factor in this giant ticking time bomb called debt that we keep adding another $1 trillion a year to, start adding it up, it's a lot of trillions of dollars. Eventually, that's real money. And the certainty of climate change, which, as Alex pointed out, we're just 100 miles away from a really vivid example of climate change. And I come from Los Angeles, which is on fire right now as well. They just evacuated Brentwood yesterday. So it's a time of great uncertainty. And here's the craziest thing of all. The craziest part of all is that we can't even agree on what the facts are. We can't agree because nobody can agree what's reality anymore, what's truth. We've kind of turned the news into something that's been discredited so badly that now we can't even be sure which side of the story is right. So all those different crises, all those different tensions I just listed, we could probably have a lively debate about them. I'm sure some of the folks in the room feel very strongly one way or the other, but we can't really agree on the facts because of fake news. And the worst part is that technology keeps advancing, keeps getting better. So thanks to things like deepfakes, we can expect this problem to get worse. They say in 2020, we're going to have deepfakes that are so good that you won't be able to trust any video. Just imagine the chaos we're going to have next year in next year's election with deepfakes proliferating. You've already seen some examples of that. As Alex said, I've been working on internet launches for 25 years, and I feel like I owe people an apology now because it hasn't really worked out the way it was supposed to, right? I mean, originally the internet was going to be about democratizing, sharing power, giving people a voice, sharing more information more freely, and so forth. Hasn't quite worked out. I think it should come with like a warning label on it of some sort. And the same thing's true with mobile, where I spent the last 20 years working. You know, mobile has become this kind of weapon of mass destruction. It's crazy, right? You put a supercomputer in the pocket of 3 billion people who've never been on the internet before, and some crazy stuff starts to come out of it. Most of us spend a lot of our time just filtering through junk, noise, confusion, chaos, and disorder, paranoia. So I think about these as blind spots. And a big deal in my practice today, working with companies, is to help them identify their blind spots. Everybody has blind spots. Right, every driver's got a blind spot, of course, when you're driving a car. But we also have them in our own lives. That's where the problems in a relationship typically come from a blind spot, where two different people live close together, but they see the world differently. And certainly as managers, you've experienced this. I find in business the number one problem is blind spots. People arrive with a set of assumptions, but they don't share them. They don't discuss them. They're buried assumptions. They might be internalized assumptions. And they assume everybody else understands them and can see them clearly, but people are raised differently, come from a different perspective. And so we don't see each other's blind spots. That's where conflict and confusion can come from. Now, when I work with a small startup company, it's pretty easy to diagnose the blind spots because usually the management team is 2 or 3 people. So it doesn't take me more than an afternoon to get to the heart of the issue. But when I work with a big company, the problems are a little bit more complicated in a big organization. Very often what happens in big companies is that the blind spot is transmitted from the leadership down. So it's super important for corporate leaders to do blind spot coaching. Now here's a little quiz. You can take this quiz. See if you suffer from Change blindness. This is an induced problem that a lot of big companies have, where companies have a culture of denial, where they say, that's not going to happen to us. I used to work at a big movie studio in the 90s. I was the digital guy. I was the guy they would blame. They'd always go, I'd come to a meeting, they'd go like, the internet and the guys like you are stealing our movies. We're going to fight. And it's like, well, okay, not me. I work for the same company. But at the time, that was the viewpoint. It was like the internet was something that was happening to us. It was bad for us, and there was resistance to it. And the idea was they were going to fight it. And I kept saying, look, try to embrace it, because this is your future. It's going to come whether you fight it or not. Any folks here work in the healthcare industry? This picture might seem familiar to some of the firms. I've worked with a couple different healthcare companies and one pharma company, and I have to say that this idea of change blindness is something that's deeply rooted in that field from my own personal experience. Your mileage may vary. But here's a chance for us to use that app that Alex just mentioned. So what I'd like to do is a quick poll. Please pull out your mobile phones and open up the app. What I want you to do is go to the agenda. That's the first button that you'll find in the app. You go to the agenda and you'll find my name, Robert Tercek. Click on that, and then you'll see a list of options, and one of them is going to be a live poll. Have you got there? Yep. Okay, great. So you're going to go to agenda, click on agenda, you find my name, click there, and you'll find a poll. And what I'd like you to do is think about your company and tell me what blind spots you might have. What blind spots do you think your company has? A lot of companies are focused on next quarter. They don't do a lot of long-term planning. You'll hear that a lot from people inside the organization, deep in the organization. Some companies have a taboo. You're not allowed to talk about disruption. It's a bad topic, and therefore we can't plan for it. Some companies don't listen to their customers, or worse, they don't even know their customers are changing, and the customer need is changing. That's a giant blind spot. Some companies don't prioritize in terms of where they spend, where they allocate resources or leadership. Some companies don't have an innovation budget or someone who owns that budget. Some companies have no vision. They literally don't know how to innovate. I'm working with a company like that right now, and it's fascinating. It's like they have no culture of innovation. They've literally outsourced all innovation to their vendors. And then sometimes companies don't look at the right kind of competitors. There's a competitor set they know well, but they're blind to disruptors that are coming out of the woodwork from a blind spot. Okay, so here's the results of the poll. As you can see, a lot of folks think they're just focused on the near term. That's a big one, leaps out right in front. But also people not listening to their customers, very common, and focus on the wrong competitor. Now, there may be others. When we first drew up this list, we came up with 22 examples. I'm sure there's many others. But the point here is to get you sensitized to this notion of a blind spot. Today, I'm going to tell you about another huge one that many companies may have in this room. Let's go back to the slides, please. Okay, so I'm going to give you a new narrative about technological change. We all know that the information economy is changing our society. It's changing the world around us. I mean this quite literally, not as a metaphor. It's actually reshaping the world around us. Stuff is disappearing, and in a moment I'll give you some vivid examples of that. My book, Vaporized, talks about that very topic, dematerialization into software. It's a big trend. So we know that's happening, but at the same time, sometimes we miss the fact that technology is also changing us. See, it works on us at the same time that it's working on our environment, our society, and our businesses. It's actually transforming us. It's giving us new habits, and we're shedding old habits. Nobody buys CDs anymore. Nobody buys DVDs anymore. We've given up that habit, and so many others. And those have rocked individual industries as those habits have been shed. The way I like to think about this is very simple. There's 3 types of connections that have occurred in our lifetimes. The first one we all know about is connecting a computer to another computer. As the story goes, it was in the Defense Department in 1968 when a fellow named Bob Metcalf was watching a couple of scientists try to reboot a mainframe computer. And he sat there going, I wonder what would happen if we connected 2 of these things together. And they thought he was nuts because they're like, we can't even get this one to run right. But from that simple idea was born ARPANET, which became the internet. And of course, Bob went on to start Ethernet. So he learned how to network computers together, and the network economy began. By 1982, we had the basic protocols for the internet. By 1993, we had the World Wide Web. Hard to believe the web is now 25 years old. So that's the first connection, computer to computer. The second connection is one we're going through right now, connecting computers to mobile phones. This process has been well underway for almost 2 decades. I started working in mobile in 1999, and I wasn't first to the party. But it's become the central focus now for the computing industry. Apple dropped the word computer from their name when the iPhone started to become their #1 source of revenue across all categories. And there have been tremendous impacts. Some of them are still ripping through society. For instance, what I alluded to a moment ago, dematerialization into software. By 2012, the smartphone in your pocket had absorbed the functionality of more than 25 consumer electronics devices. Just 6 years before that, in 2006, if you were on an airplane and you got up to use the restroom, you walked down the aisle and you noticed people had Game Boys or DVD players or MP3 players. All that stuff is gone. And the Japanese electronics companies that manufactured them experienced double-digit decreases in sales throughout the past decade. It crushed those electronics companies. That's dematerialization. There are real consequences to these changes. We take them for granted in our lives. We enjoy the fruits of them. We rarely stop to think about who the victims of these changes might be. What habits do we no longer have? We literally don't carry that other stuff around anymore. I promised you 3 types of connections. This is the third, connecting computers to everything. Everything you can possibly connect will be connected. Here's an eye chart. This looks like something from the eye doctor's office. I'm not going to go through it in detail, I promise you. I know people are going like, oh God, another talk about IoT. I got to go make a phone call. No, stay with me, I promise. This will be short. Painless, I promise. Why I put this chart up is this is from Beach and Research. They're trying to show all the different places where IoT is sort of percolating through the economy. And it is quite extraordinary. And I think most of those will be represented this week. So I thought it was a useful chart to show. Everything about buildings and energy, of course, consumer and home IoT, but also things like healthcare and a reinvention of retail. And of course, public safety and security, network security, transportation. All of these fields are being transformed. So this is like a ripple of technology that's moving through every industry. And literally, whatever can be connected will be connected. So here's a simple chart that just summarizes what I just talked about. You take the hundreds of millions of computers that were connected to each other. That's the internet era. And then the billions of smart devices, mobile devices, that are connected to those computers. And then the tens of billions of smart devices, IoT devices. By some estimates, there are about 30 or 40 billion devices connected, but we all know that's not even halfway to the total number, which will be in the hundreds of billions of devices that are connected. But even this isn't the enormity. This isn't the full scope of the change that's coming, because there's another change happening right away. That's trillions of sensors. And this transformation is just beginning. But by the end of the next decade, there'll be trillions of sensors in our roadways, in our homes, in our office buildings, hospitals, schools. We'll start to put sensing ability into the environment around us. And this means that we're going to be generating an enormous amount of data, a staggering amount of data. A few years ago, the economists called it the data deluge, but the number has doubled and doubled and doubled since this article was published. An extraordinary amount of data is being generated. In 2010, we entered the zettabyte era. Zettabyte's a funny word. We used to measure large data sets in petabytes and exabytes, but by 2020, we need a new word, a zettabyte. A zettabyte is a 1 followed by 21 zeros. It's a million gigabytes of data. Think about a 1 gig flash drive, right? It used to be more memory than any computer had. Today, we give them away for free at trade shows, and you don't want them because they probably have spyware on them, right? Now, think about a stack of 1 million flash drives. It would fill this room. And now think of 1 million stacks that size. It would cover the whole peninsula. That's how much data we generated in 2010. And by next year, we'll have a 40-fold increase. A 40-fold increase in the amount of data that we generate by 2020. And that's nothing. Because IDC, the company that gathers this data, says that by 2025, that number will increase. It'll double and double again by 2025 to 175 zettabytes of data. We're going to need a new word pretty soon. It's astonishing how much data we're collecting. We're awash in data. 10 years ago, I worked with companies that were data poor, and they were asking me if I could recommend a data scientist. Today, those companies have the opposite problem. They're awash in data. You probably heard this phrase, data is the new oil. Pundits say that all the time. Futurists will tell you about that. I often wonder about this phrase, data is the new oil. Well, no, oil's scarce. That's why it's valuable. We're awash in data. I was just talking to guys from HPE outside, and they said, we used to talk about data lakes. Now they're data oceans. And a lot of that data is dark. We don't even know how to use it. We don't even know how to process it. It's just sitting there. We're wondering why we collect it. In fact, we have such an abundance of data that you hear different messages inside a company. Sometimes I'll talk to a CEO, and he'll say to me, data is our greatest asset. I'm like, wow, that's impressive. Good, cool, right on. And then you don't walk down the hall to the CFO, and I'll ask her, well, show me where data is on the balance sheet. And she looks at me cross-eyed and says, data's not on the balance sheet. And I'm like, well, the CEO just said it was an asset. She's like, it's not on our balance sheet. Data's a cost center. We're trying to minimize the amount we spend on data. So companies have paradoxical understanding of what this is, and that explains why every week there's another data breach. We're not treating these like assets. If we don't invest in them, manage them like assets, our data assets are going to underperform, and our companies will underperform as well. The data sets are so large now that we can't manage them ourselves. We need the help of machines. That's why cognitive computing and machine learning is so valuable. When I wrote Vaporized, I interviewed Kevin Kelly, the technologist and the author, and he gave me this wonderful quote. He said, the business plans of the next 10,000 startups are easy to forecast. Take anything and add AI. And it's true. Today I'm working with firms that are developing AI for healthcare, AI for advertising, AI for marketing, AI for various business processes, including making media. Back to deepfakes, right? This is like a recursive conversation. But AI is starting to percolate into every single industry because as we gather more and more data, we can feed those algorithms and train them, and they can learn faster. So sometimes when we talk about or think about the Internet of Things, we tend to think about it in terms of devices that are connected. There's nothing wrong with that, except that we're underdefining the opportunity. Because when you really think about the Internet of Things, you have to think of it as like a system of systems. So it's not just smart devices, it's smart devices connected to sensor networks, and those sensor networks are also connected back to the cloud, and the cloud is delivering dynamic digital services that generate really big data sets that are so large, we need machine learning, cognitive computing, and artificial intelligence to manage them. So when we talk about IoT, this is the full stack. And for me, this is the starting point for the next wave, the next big change that's coming. Every single technology on this list has been going through an incredible evolution. Take the cloud, for instance. 10 years ago, we had the first public cloud. Today, we have hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, virtualization, containers. Someone from VMware here, I think you got VMware. Talk to the folks from VMware. I know they're attending this event. They're like the champions in virtualization. So just in that one sector, in this stack, there's been an endless variation, tremendous transformation. So it's like a moving target. And that lesson there is for all of us, which is that your digital transformation journey is never done. This tech stack is going to continue to evolve and change. So digital transformation is a never-ending process for every company. And as we think about the scope of all that, I think we're not thinking big enough. I think there's even bigger opportunity ahead. And now I'm going to finally tell you what that is. So when you think about when everything's connected, there's really just two circles here. There's stuff inside the orange circle, and that's the smart stuff. Smart devices. They have a network connection. They've got some processing power. They've got the ability to communicate. Then there's stuff outside the orange circle, and that's the Internet of dumb things. These are things that don't have processors and they don't have a network connection. How can they be a part of this tremendous transformation? Well, they can. See, not everything can be connected, but everything has a digital identity, or everything can have a digital identity. And if it can be detected by a sensor, then it can be included in the Internet of Everything. And that's a really gigantic opportunity. That's a much larger scale than the billions and trillions of devices I was just telling you about. 4 years ago, the folks that operate GS1 in the US contacted me to work on a special project. They said, we need you to help us take the standard barcode, which GS1 manages, the barcode specification that is 45 years old as of this month. 45 years old. A very sturdy standard. It's scanned more than 6 billion times a day. GS1 is the standards body that manages it. They have more than 1 million participating companies. All of the manufacturers on the planet are part of GS1. They call GS1's barcode the global language of commerce. But the weird thing about the barcode is machines can't understand it. They can scan it, but they can't understand it. So it's not fully digital. It's like a picture of a digital image. It's not fully digital. And they said, can you help us unify physical products and physical product identity with all the invisible digital data that surrounds each product? What a cool challenge. I was like, yeah, let's go figure that out together. So we've been working on it. Last September, we issued a new standard, a specification for a new standard, which you might call Barcode 2.0. It's called GS1 Digital Link, and it's designed to do this exact thing. Basically, you can now scan a barcode, this new barcode, and it'll automatically resolve to data. So you'll start to see the invisible cloud of data that comes with every physical product. We conceive of every product having a cloud half. I'll give you an example, a practical example. I work in Australia quite a lot, and I know some of the folks at Treasury Wines, which in terms of IoT is a very advanced wine company. You may know the wine label Penfolds. That's their flagship brand. But while I was there, they told me about a new wine they're introducing called 19 Crimes, and it plays on the heritage of Australia and of convicts from Ireland and the UK being sent over to Australia in the transport. And so you have these labels that depict various criminals. And so that's kind of like a heritage play in Australia. But what was cool and why they knew I would like this is they said, take out your phone and check this out. As you scan that picture, he comes to life. The character will come to life and start telling you about the transport and the 6 months on the sea or whatever. I'm not going to do an Australian accent, sorry. I'm not an impressionist. But anyway, the cool thing is that the bottle could come to life. Now, this is really important because wine is an information-rich product, right? So wine has a tremendous amount of information embedded in it. But wine labels don't do very much work. If you think about it, it's a little weird, right? So often a wine label's in the wrong language. You can't even read the thing. And yet, everybody in the wine industry wants you to think that they're connoisseurs, that they're knowledgeable about all this data, implicit, that's embedded in all those products. And what Treasury Wines is doing is saying, why don't we unlock that information content and allow the label to start to sell the bottle to you the same way that a connoisseur might, or a sommelier would in a restaurant. It's a cool idea. It's a good illustration of the power of digital identity on a physical product. The product itself is becoming the new channel. Take note of this. You see, in the consumer product world and in the food world, there is an existential crisis, two actually happening. The first one is that retailers are shrinking their footprint and they're pushing branded products off the shelf as they try to introduce their own private label merchandise. Now, if you talk to retailers, they'll deny that that's happening. But if you talk to the CPG companies, they'll say, yeah, there's some truth to that statement. So there's a struggle going on for shelf space in the store. That's the first channel where consumers find out about products. The second channel is advertising, and in particular, broadcast media. Oh, but wait, broadcast television's in decline. It's in a long-term secular decline. So if your fate is hitched to broadcast television, you're in serious trouble. And that's where the CPG companies find themselves today. They've got to find another channel. That package has to work harder. The label on the pack has to work harder. The package is the new channel. The package has to teach the consumer. Not just the marketing information. Sure, we can envision an idea that in the future you'll go into a grocery store or a retail shop and you'll have some cool AR goggles on, and then the store will start to talk to you. All the products on the shelf will start to talk to you. And that'll either be great or some kind of consumerist hell. I don't know. Actually, what's going to happen will be even more interesting. I had a very interesting conversation with a group of GS1 executives 2 nights ago. And here's what they told me. They said it's going to be a struggle between the manufacturers of products and the retailers. They're both going to introduce some sort of app. They're going to both want to put a data overlay. They're going to want to both have a conversation. And I said, but wait a minute. What if I'm a person with a special dietary need and I want an app that's for me? So consumers are going to go get their own app. So when you go in a store, it's going to be cacophony and chaos for a little while because you're going to have all these multiple competing languages being spoken to you, different offers, different stories, different narratives. But what we're going to do is unlock all that information that's inside that physical product and make it available to consumers in a way that they can use it. So here's the problem that we solved at GS1 with Digital Link. Physical identity is a link to digital metadata. And it's not just marketing. Of course, there's a ton of marketing data associated with every single product, but that's just a piece of it. There's also the documentation that comes with a product. You know, people buy stuff, they throw the package away, they throw the manuals away, and then 6 months later, they're looking around in the kitchen in a drawer or something trying to find it. Wouldn't it be great if you could just scan that item and get that information on whatever device you happen to have? People care about sourcing. People care about ingredients. Some people, it's life or death. And what we found is that some companies will change their formulation. They may or may not remove nuts in a formulation. Consumers might not know that. So it's super important to have a label that can talk to you and alert you to those changes. People want to be able to give products to other people. Think about your suitcase. You know, in the future, you'll have a suitcase that knows your whole history, your travel history, and so forth. But then your kids are going to go to college and you give them your suitcase and you upgrade to a new suitcase. You're going to have to bequeath that thing to them and transfer ownership rights over. Same thing with your smart car, right? And it brings up an interesting question about permissions. When you sell a smart car to a new owner, what permissions does that new owner have? Yeah, they might want to see the repair history. That seems reasonable. But should they see all the places you've traveled to with that car? Probably not. So all sorts of interesting questions come up. We're going to give new life to that information that's embedded in those products. Today, most of that information is not accessible. So I'm very excited about this. I'm particularly gratified because 2 nights ago I spoke to the head of digital for Procter & Gamble, and he told me that they're going to enable every item that they make for Digital Link. And I said, really, what's the use case? And he could only name a couple. Some of it's confidential, of course. He can only name a couple, but he said it's new. He goes, use cases are going to emerge. We just know that this is the direction it's going in. And P&G today is known as a company that has brands and products. And he said in the future, they'll be known as a company that has brands, products, and digital metadata. And that's what he's focused on growing. So he's going to enable every single product for those stories. Digital Link will be useful in the warehouse for the people who are picking and packing for, say, e-commerce and other warehouse workers. It's going to be useful also when the product has to be repaired, because the repairman can scan that item. And so you can start to see different use cases for this will give you different bits of information that are relevant to that particular context. So it's an interesting and exciting idea. The principle behind it is detection without connection. So you do not need to have a connected product. That can of peas or that pair of blue jeans doesn't necessarily have to be internet enabled to be scannable, to be identified. The second part implicit in this notion is that these codes are also machine readable. Now, every step of the global supply chain, the $14 trillion global supply chain, has some form of automation underway or planned. And eventually, yes, they would like to go to full autonomy, but those days seem to lie far in the future. What's been missing is digital identity. Second, a generalized artificial intelligence that does not yet exist. Third, some sort of blockchain and smart contracts so that one automated system, say a dark factory someplace in Asia, can transfer goods to a truck, an automated truck that will take them to a robotic port and put them on a robotic ship. And the robotic ship will show up at another port and go to a robotic logistics center and another robotic truck and to some sort of automated store in the future. I know the words coming out of my mouth sound like science fiction today. 10 years from now, this is going to be commonplace. At the heart of it is digital identity. Secure, traceable digital identity. Blockchain is important so that we can audit this, so we can see what these automated systems are doing with our goods. This brings me to the concept of the digital twin. It's a concept I know at least half the people in this room are familiar with because your companies are building them. There are examples of this out in the hallway, but the digital twin is a powerful concept. It was developed originally by NASA so that they could understand what was going on with spacecraft far away. You load up a device with enough sensors and you build a very accurate digital representation of it, and now you have a real-time model that can tell you exactly what's happening even when the thing is out in space. It's also useful for very large-scale industrial settings. This is a picture of CERN's Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland. Very expensive piece of equipment, very large, 27-kilometer piece of equipment. You don't want to wreck something that big, but they're smashing molecules together at very high speeds. So it makes a good deal of sense to test it rigorously in a digital twin before you unleash that system. Now we're starting to see the cost of sensors drop. We're starting to see those sensors deployed, as I mentioned a moment ago. We're going to move into a world of trillions of sensors. You're going to see digital twins for everything. The folks at Schneider Electric, I think, are participating here, and you can talk to them about gas turbines that have been instrumented with sensors so that they understand what's happening inside of that very large, expensive part when it's rotating at high speed. The folks at GE can tell you what they've done with instrumenting jet engines, such that when an airplane is in flight, the crew on the ground at the next airport it lands already knows which parts are wearing out. They can do predictive maintenance. The folks at GE said to me, we're not selling products anymore, we're selling outcomes. They can guarantee uptime for airline customers the same way, say, an internet service provider guarantees uptime or a telco company will guarantee uptime. It's a transformation of a business model. You're no longer selling physical goods. You're providing a digital service. This is a key point for my talk today. As goods become more information intense and as we can extract that information and make it useful, they shed the characteristics of physical products. They take on the dynamics of a digital service. There, I just summarized the whole talk in one slide. Snap that. So software models we've had for many, many years. Right? For 50 years, you can model anything in software. You can model a job function, a business process. Some claim you can model a whole company in software. Okay. But what's happening now that's different with digital twins is those software models now operate on the real world. You can run the real world from the software model. That's a gigantic change. And again, there are examples of this right outside. So this is not science fiction. It's happening right now. Big new breakthrough is that phone in your pocket, if you recently upgraded, that phone with the 3 cameras. Now you have dimensional photography. We're starting to build out much richer models of the world around us. Some folks call it geospatial computing or spatial computing. Some folks call it 3D computing. It's a lot easier than saying simultaneous localization and mapping. SLAM, it's a great acronym, SLAM. What that means is that you can actually localize the device inside of a three-dimensional environment. So it's not just mapping a 3D environment, but it's telling you where it is relative to all those points. So that this is what the Colosseum would look like to such a phone when you map it. And this is crucially important for augmented reality. It's also crucially important for autonomous systems that have to navigate through cities. For about 20 years, we've had building information modeling systems. This is software that allows us to map out every single feature and function in a building. The mechanical systems, the heating, the air systems, electrical systems, and so on. And then you can also build a composite model. But now, with the AR point cloud that I just showed you, geospatial computing or 3D computing, you can merge those two things together. You can merge that AR point cloud together with the building information modeling, and you get much more precise real-time information about what's happening inside of that plant. So this is not a digital twin for a part or a product or a piece of an airplane. Now we can actually start to model in real time entire factories. High fidelity models, and we can manage those factories from the models. And it's not limited to a building or a plant. This can now be applied at scale for city scale monitoring. One of the dirty secrets of the autonomous vehicle business is that they need smart cities to function properly. We're never going to get to scale if you've got a dozen different companies with their own versions of artificial intelligence and their own data sets driving around the city. You're going to have a problem. You got to have a smart city, and the two are going to have to talk to each other. And so we're going to need city scale monitoring. That's where this fits in. Not only that, to manage our climate in the future, we're also going to need to take technologies like geographical information systems, GIS. It's also been around since 2002. So it's the same vintage as BIM. It's similar concept to BIM. You're taking the physical attributes of the land, the water, the wetlands, and so forth, and combining it with the metadata around it, like the rights, the ownership, the policy holders, the zoning regulations, and so forth. So we're taking facts on the ground plus data, metadata, combining them together, and once again, we're going to be using constant monitoring to manage these. And again, this is not science fiction. Just last week, the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, announced a partnership with the Bloomberg Charities, the Bloomberg Philanthropies, and a group called Planet. They used to be called Planet Labs, but their name now is Planet. Planet runs the largest privately owned collection of satellites in space. And they're using them for ground-based monitoring. They can monitor things. They take 1.4 million high-resolution images of 300 million kilometers of Earth's surface every single day. 1.4 million images a day. It's the largest data set that's available at high resolution, and it's a great way to monitor climate change. It's a great way to monitor changing environments, and much, much more. Now, this is technology that just a few years ago was only available to certain governments, and now it's available as a digital service. You can sign up for it, so that the state of California can step up, even when the United States federal government decides it doesn't want to do this anymore with its own satellites. So far, I've been talking about reality mining. Extracting information out of reality and turning it into a useful model. But there's a flip side to this notion, which is building virtual worlds. And again, you'll see examples of that here at Spark. This is about the fun stuff, virtual reality, game worlds, persistent worlds, building avatars, and so forth. So two different ideas, but similar concepts. They're both models. Philip Rosedale is the guy who created Second Life, which is the longest and most successful virtual world around. It's been around for more than 10 years, maybe 20 years. He recently launched a new business called High Fidelity that gives us really rich 3D VR worlds. But what's key is it's open source. Anybody can build a virtual world. And they've kind of pivoted towards enterprises, as far as I understand right now. Fortnite, one of the most popular games in the world with tens of millions of players, has recently introduced a set of tools that will allow anyone to build an island. Anybody can build a Fortnite world. And they're easy to use. They're designed to be as easy to use as, say, Minecraft. So a whole generation that grew up playing Minecraft is now going to start to build islands where they can kill each other. And then just 2 weeks ago, Mark Zuckerberg announced that Facebook is getting into virtual reality in a big way as well. Horizon is their 3D world, it's sort of a 3D cartoon avatar world, and it will be available sometime in 2020. So Facebook is leading the charge. As you know, they've already made a massive investment in VR, in their investment in Oculus. And the new Oculus Quest is actually quite good. VR is coming of age. And Facebook's going to be ready for it with an awesome product. Anyone can build a virtual world inside of Horizon. So as you can hear, what I'm describing is that we're going to be starting to see a lot of virtual worlds being made. It won't be a handful, it'll be millions. And the most interesting part to me is when you blend these VR worlds, these virtual worlds with the real world. That's where augmented reality fits in. And again, Facebook's at the forefront. They've got a partnership with Ray-Bans to make normal looking glasses, not Google Glass, but normal looking glasses, not glasses that make you look like a geek. Apparently, we'll see. We'll see. It's Silicon Valley after all. But apparently they're going to be bringing out these glasses next year as well. So AR glasses. And they're not the only ones. Of course, Apple has been patenting all sorts of stuff related to augmented reality. We know they've already got the 3D camera on the phone. We know they've already got an ultra wideband chip in the new phone. So Apple clearly has an AR device. And actually, there's a number of other companies that are building AR. I think Samsung just last week announced that they're also going to be in the AR game. So you're going to see a lot of augmented reality devices. This means we're going to start to see virtual overlays mapped onto the world. To make this work really well, we'll need the 5G network because you need that low latency network in order to render this with precision, these overlays. But that 5G network is being rolled out right now. It'll probably be a little bit more mature in 3 or 4 years. So we can expect that's probably the timeline for this stuff to break in a big way, massive way. And many companies are now saying that this is the next computing platform. When I told you about 3D computing or geospatial computing, this is exactly what the big internet giants are banking on, is the next thing. We will be in a world of millions and millions of virtual worlds. You wonder, well, where will all the jobs go when the robots take all of our normal manufacturing and farming jobs? It's building virtual worlds, right? There'll be an unlimited appetite for virtual worlds for other humans. This, folks, is a gigantic opportunity. I consider it the largest opportunity of our lifetime. The idea that you can map and model any part of the real world and start to mine it, either for more productivity, better efficiency in a real world situation, or for creativity and entertainment and experience in a virtual and fun way. It's a gigantic opportunity. I spoke to a VC just a couple weeks ago about this, and he smiled and said, he gave me this brilliant quote, but he said, "You can't use my face or my name." So that's not him, and I blanked it out. He didn't want anyone to know that he said this, but I love the statement. He's like, personally, I can't wait until every pixel and voxel of these virtual worlds is monetized. He saw it as a gigantic land grab, and in his viewpoint, he said, look, it's like underutilized real estate is the worst kind of real estate in the world. Well, digital real estate is totally underutilized. So he sees a great growth opportunity. In a way, it's like that Oklahoma Sooner challenge, back in the 1880s, 1889, when everybody lined up their wagons and went out to stake out their land on the frontier. Literally every company in this room in the future will be building virtual twins and virtual worlds. And many of you already are. Oh, but wait. Anxiety was the theme. I got to get back to the main theme. So I just shared with you what I think is a gigantic opportunity. I hope you see that as well. This idea of reality mapping, reality mining, and building virtual worlds. But let me bring it right back to where I started, which is anxiety, this theme of anxiety. You see, there's been this process since the 1990s of deconstructing consensus reality. It started with deregulation of mass media. Mass media is what taught us how to agree on whatever was in the news or politics that day. Once we started to break down, deregulate mass media, and then in the 2000s, where the internet gave us millions of other alternative outlets and alternative facts, suddenly we got to a point where each person out there has their own set of sources that they trust and rely on, and everything else is fake news, and we lost consensus reality, and we ended up with fragmented reality. And my fear is that with millions and millions of virtual worlds coming, we're going to see this problem exacerbated. It'll be like you take a gigantic mirror and smash it into millions of pieces and give everybody a piece, and that's going to be their perspective on this world. That's going to be their view of this world. So that's risk number one, fragmented reality. And we already know from filter bubbles what happens when people live inside of a fragmented reality with just a few news sources. We end up with a tribal consciousness where we're so identified with our viewpoint, we're so identified with our news source that we actually hate the other people and refuse to acknowledge the validity of their viewpoints. And that's the nature of our political environment, not just in the US, worldwide. Every democracy around the world right now, you can see these conflicts. You can see it in Hong Kong. You can see it in Thailand. You can see it in India and Pakistan. All over Eastern Europe. So this is not something that's a local phenomenon limited to the United States of America. This is percolating through every society on the planet, and most particularly democracies. Democracies must have good information to function. If you want to destabilize a democracy, feed it false information, false narratives that cause people to doubt their news sources. So my concern with the virtual worlds is that we're going to exacerbate this problem that we still haven't found a solution for. Now, some folks are going to say, hang on. You're talking about two totally different things. On the one side, we've got reality mining and mapping where we're observing and recording facts on the ground. This is factual. It's informational. And over here, we're talking about using imagination to invent new worlds. They're fiction. Well, not quite. Because almost all of these, how they're going to be applied and used, will be some hybrid of the two. That's where augmented reality fits in. That's where digital twins fit in. They're digital expressions of facts, but they're going to be influenced by imagination. We're going to experience them ourselves emotionally in some way. There'll be emotional content embedded in them. We can't filter that out. And these models are only as good as the inputs and the data that we put into them. So in fact, all of these things are models that coexist on a spectrum, from highly accurate to highly imaginative, but they're all on the same spectrum. They're all subject to the same problem. And there are a couple big warning signs. We've had these messages in our culture for many years. The mathematician Alfred Korzybski said this great phrase, the map is not the territory. The danger is when you start to think the map is the territory. And that's when you veer from consensus reality into consensus hallucination. And it's a real problem. I've seen this happen in many, many companies. You see this often in startup companies where they have a business model. They spend so many months perfecting their business model, they're kind of like clueless or delusional about the real world. And often when you hear a startup company has to pivot, what they're really doing is they're saying, okay, we started with this idea. We had a model, we tried the model, and then we met the real world and turned this around. We had to go in a different direction. Now, I know you're sitting there going, that's never going to happen to me. No way. My company's too smart. The smartest people in the world are the most susceptible to this. The smartest investors can make enormous blunders when they start to believe too much in their model. And we have a very vivid example of this from the last 6 weeks as we watched WeWork self-destruct. They went out to the public markets at a valuation around $40 billion. The public market said no chance when they found out they were losing $200,000 every hour of the day. SoftBank was the main investor, and SoftBank has this habit of pumping billions of dollars in the hopes of generating a unicorn. It's a bit like force-feeding a goose so that you can create some foie gras. That plan's not working so well right now. SoftBank's having to reconnect with reality. They have to take stock of reality after all the blitzscaling. So even the smartest people in the room are subject to this kind of delusional thinking based on a model that they mistake for reality. George Box is a statistician from the UK, and he said, all models are wrong. All models are fiction, but some are useful. That's a really great way to think about artificial intelligence. All models are wrong, but some are useful. And he said, look, the key thing to do is to understand how wrong can your model be and still be useful. But we don't do that, right? You see a lot of hubris right now, especially in the field of machine learning. A lot of hubris about these black box algorithms. We don't really know what goes on inside the black box. And what the marketing people are telling us is it can slice, it can dice, it can keep the baby dry. I mean, you got to approach this stuff with a little bit of caution, a little bit of skepticism. And I think there's a way to approach this that makes sense, but it's going to require something that's hard to muster in the technology industry today, and that's humility. We have to ask ourselves a frank question. What values are we maximizing? What values have we optimized this process for? And we all know that when you optimize one value, you're going to minimize another value, but we never talk about what we minimize. I'll give you a vivid example, and then I'll give you a hard example. The vivid example comes to us from China. So today it's very fashionable to bash China. It fits our narrative that we're being told right now. Depending on the news source, you may have heard about China's social credit system. Have you heard about this, China's social credit score? And people are alarmed and horrified by this. The principle of it does sound very Orwellian. The idea is that the Chinese government is going to monitor your use of social media. And they're going to see who you're connected to and what you're talking about. And if you're connected to people who are good, faithful citizens, who are good participants and so forth, and you're talking about nice things, then you're going to get more social credit. But if you're connected to hoodlums and people who object and have that nasty habit of protesting, well, then you're going to lose some credit score. And you might find it harder to get your driver's license or your passport renewed. Or you might find that you're not eligible for an international trip. Now, I don't know if this is actually happening in China. I've just read it. And I don't even know if I can trust the news sources. The people I've talked to in China, they said, you're crazy. That's not happening here. So I'm not sure if that's actually the reality or not, but that's what I've heard about China's social credit system. And Americans are horrified, right? Because we believe fundamentally in individual liberty. We tell ourselves that all the time. Every car commercial is about freedom and liberty. So it's been drummed into our consciousness now for 50 or 60 years. So we look at this, we say, this is terrible. You're stealing people's individual liberty to voice themselves, to make friends and associate freely, all these things that we hold so dear. But if you've worked in China, as I have, you know that what they really value a lot in China is social cohesion, and that's more important than individual expression. So that's what they're doing. So there's a very vivid example. It's an easy one to get because we're thousands of miles away. We're not in that culture. And so we can look at it and go, okay, they're optimizing for social cohesion and they're minimizing individual expression. How does it work in the United States? This is a little trickier. We're inside the fishbowl. Fish can't see the bowl. So you have to kind of leap out of the fishbowl imaginatively to see what values we optimize for. And we tell ourselves that we run a market economy. That's a fictional thing. It's like a unicorn. A free market economy. Most of the time when people say they support a free market economy, they say, what they really mean is they support the status quo. They don't want to change the current set of rules. A free market economy optimizes for efficiency, and of course it's going to minimize the value of equality. It has to. This is why business people hate going to court, because courts are optimized for fairness and equality, and they move extraordinarily slowly. So it's quite the opposite in business. A globalized economy is going to optimize for scale. We've seen that. The most valuable companies in the world are the ones that can scale their business model to planetary level. But by definition, the company that's optimized for scale is not going to be focused on community, on local community. So we trade that value for the value that we're optimizing for. But there's more. What makes the United States so difficult is that we're operating with multiple models right now in our economy. And we can't see all the different variables. So here are two more. An information economy optimizes for data collection and minimizes value of privacy, of course. But you might say, well, we're actually not an information society. We're in an attention economy. Think about some prominent voices on Twitter. Twitter optimizes for narcissism, the people who can absorb the most attention. And it minimizes the value of consensus. That's one of our big problems we have right now. So, my final thoughts for you tonight. As you think about this world that we're moving into, these virtual systems that are operated by artificial intelligence, approach them with humility. Approach them with self-awareness. The people that wrote these algorithms are human beings just like us, full of bias and failings and blind spots. Practice empathy, particularly for the people who are going to be subject to those algorithms. Start to practice some humility and some empathy. Yesterday I visited the mission in Carmel. And we spoke to the priest there about humility, and he said humility is truth. Humility is being honest about what you are. It's not fake humility where you make up a story, oh no, I'm not that thing. And it's also not boastfulness and pride, where you pump yourself up. Humility is honesty about where you are right now. If we can develop that level of honesty, we're going to be more successful with this algorithm-driven, model-shaped world. But the best way to guarantee that is transparency. We need to be open and honest with other people about what we're doing and how these systems actually work. I can't give you a handy 5-bullet point way to solve all these problems. This is not a Fortune magazine article today. I'm presenting you with very complex issues that are challenging our society as we grow. And the problems are going to scale to global level. All I can tell you is what I'm going to do. And in my work, I am going to consciously optimize for the following values. Wonder and curiosity, that sense of joy of discovery that people have. I want to give people more opportunity to experience that. I want to optimize for human potential, and particularly for human expression. And perhaps most importantly of all, I want to remind people to exercise their critical thinking capacities. That's what sets us apart from machines. That's what makes us human. I'm Robert Tercek, the author of Vaporized. I am so thrilled to be here with you. I'll be around tomorrow as well. I'm eager to talk to you all. And there are copies of my book available outside. Thank you for your time. Thank you.